It's Lisa from Been There, Got Out. I know this is 3 interviews in a row this week, but today's guest I have been so excited to talk to. I was thinking a little while ago, and I see you, Jessica, that so many people in our community, even though they're fighting a toxic ex, they're still grieving the relationship. And so I found Jessica, and she was so amazing at getting back to me right away, which was wonderful. And and Jessica, you also completely understand because of your own personal experience. But thank you so much for agreeing to come on with me. And before we even get started, can you just say, what is grief? Like, what does grief mean? Because I think we have this misguided idea that it's when somebody dies.
Ah, so it's grief is the feeling of loss after any loss. It's the pain or the anger or the denial, that you feel after any loss. A loss could be a positive thing. It's sending your child off to college, but it's still a loss. But here, I think we're going to be talking primarily about
Right.
divorce, and divorce is can be complicated in its own way, especially when you're dealing with high conflict divorce.
Yeah. So before we even get into it, Jessica, can you just let people know, in case they don't already, who you are and your background?
So I am a licensed clinical social worker. I have licensed in New Jersey and New York. I'm sorry, New Jersey. I was licensed in New York and California. I'm not practicing. I'm here more helping on social media, and I have a book coming out. And I have been working since 1988 as a psychotherapist, dealing with many, couples, families, individuals becoming the healthiest they can be in situations. And I'm dealing with loss throughout that, as well as the last 16, 17 years as a hospice social worker. Now I do as a volunteer and help people through the grief process after death.
Yeah.
And
And grief, even though we mentioned death, like physical death, that today we're talking about the death of a relationship, whether it's a marriage or just a relationship in general, but primarily romantic relationship. So I know there's a lot of guilt around still missing someone who is so abusive to us. Can you talk a little bit about why this type of feeling is so complicated?
Well, first of all, it's understandable. I want people to not feel badly or about feeling like they're missing someone. There's several components that happen. One is something called trauma bonding, and that is the cycle where let's just talk a little bit about a narcissistic relationship or a high conflict toxic relationship, where in the beginning it's very positive. And that happens in even healthy relationships. The beginning is, we call it love bombing when it's a toxic one, but the high, the happy moments, the reason why you want to be with that person. But when you're in a toxic relationship, that changes, and then there becomes a cycle where it's not whatever is going on. It could be abuse. It could be just which is abuse. It's the silent abuse, which is verbal abuse, saying someone's too sensitive, telling someone they're not valid, turning things around, gaslighting them, and then they feel that the person's maybe drifting away, and they pull them back and they do something positive again. But it's intermittent. It's not constant. So there's an addictive component to it. I felt addicted in my relationships. You did point out that I've been through it as well, and I have been through many, unfortunately, toxic relationships and gone through divorce and the grief. And there's a component. I mean, I think there was a study done a while ago. I'm not sure this is valid recently, but people go back about 7 times on average
Oh,
to
yeah.
their yeah, and you're drawn back in. And so there's actually a physical component to a trauma bond, and it feels. I mean, I used to say I felt addicted, and that it's not healthy. That. I mean, I like to say that I'm a psychotherapist that help people, and I still did it. So if I can do it, there should be no shame in feeling this way. But you live. I used to say I always was chasing the carrot. I was chasing those good moments. I was chasing what it was in the beginning, and I put a lot of value on those moments of, we're going to go out tonight, and that's going to be the time that person's going to remember how they love me, and they're going to be nice to me. I mean, it's you're on a constant state of hyper vigilance. You're on, it's very difficult to go through, but you don't necessarily know that until you can remove yourself and look back. But so there's a physical component. It feels like addiction, and so even when you're out, either you're in the trauma bond, but they also hoover you back in. I mean, they don't let you go so easily.
Right. And Hoover, just say what Hoover is. I mean, I know what it means, but in case somebody doesn't understand
Sure.
Hoover.
So you think of the Hoover vacuum. If maybe I'm dating myself, but the Hoover vacuum, you're being sucked back in. And what does a person do? It could be, I'll go to therapy. I will. They start being nice to the children. They never paid attention to the children. They tell you they love you when they hadn't said it in 2 years. I'll change. I mean, you see, the old fashioned way that you used to think about the cycle of abuse, where they hand you flowers, then they abuse you, and then the next day they're handing you flowers and buying you jewelry. It's a more understandable a way of explaining it now. We understand it more than we used to. But so the hoovering can happen in a relationship when the party is starting to step away, or after the relationship. And it doesn't mean the person wants you. The person just needs to have control over you. The person still needs to be connected for their own psyche. But that's one of the things. So where in regard to grief, so when you have a loss, you go through these stages of grief, and it isn't necessarily cyclical, but you go through these stages, and then you can have an art of acceptance. What happens with someone who's being hoovered, or having a conflict with children in a court system, is it's very difficult to grieve. It's very difficult to go through this process, because you're constantly being pulled back in. You're constantly, and they use the children, as you know, and so it's not like you're just being allowed to process what's happened. It's not like you're necessarily being allowed to go through stages of grief, or just start to heal, because they're constantly, they're constantly potentially bringing you back to court, or using the children, or so I know that you talked about it, but there's techniques of keeping as much distance and boundaries as you can. But if you have children, you can't fully do that.
Yeah, yeah. And as you were talking about going back to those what you imagine were happy moments, I always think about my partner Chris, who talks about how in his marriage he kept thinking, I want to get back to those good old days.
Yeah.
And then when you have some distance, you realize they were actually never that great. It was just part of that whole love bombing, that beginning phase.
The best thing it can happen to a person is get to that distance,
Emotional detachment.
emotional detachment, and that's when you can start realizing that. But when you're in the midst of it, you know, there's a thing called cognitive dissonance. So where you may know logically, this for a moment, this person doesn't love me, but then they act in a way, and it's very confusing. So you make up stories of, oh, okay, they were just having a hard day at work, and that's why they're acting that way. Or you play this. I call it the traitor within, but you play this, this game with yourself in order to make it work.
Yeah.
So it's self in order to make things work. It's very confusing. It jumbles your brain.
Yeah. I
And
always think about hope being the thing that harms us the most with these relationships, because we keep thinking, well, maybe they're going to change, or we remember the last nice thing that they did and think, oh, well, maybe we'll get back to that. And like you said, your brain chemistry changes. So if your brain chemistry has changed, how can you undo trauma bonding? Like, how do people actually get past those 7 times? And as a domestic violence advocate, we say 7 to 9 times on average. So that's just average. So some people, it takes even more chances to really get away, especially, and it's so much harder when you do have kids.
right.
So what do we do?
So the most important thing to do is create as much of a boundary as you can. So depending on, like you said, with kids, the boundary is, there has to be some sort of, although there are apps and things that you can do to create some sort of separation, but you're still involved with them. Without children, I mean, my recommendation is, if you don't have children, is to literally cut it off. Don't look at their social media. Don't look at their friends' social media. Don't look at their family's social media. You have to get them out of your head. I absolutely recommend professional counseling with someone who understands the trauma, who's trauma informed, who understands a high conflict divorce, who understands toxic relationships and narcissism, because you could be, and I've seen it, and it happened to me. You can be re-abused by a
Oh,
therapist if they don't get it.
tell me about it.
They,
No offense, Jessica, but
no, I went to therapist, and that it was absolutely, I was the one who was depressed. I wasn't depressed. I was the one who was, so absolutely was, yes. Can you trust your therapist? So it's very vital that you go to someone who understands it, and that you surround yourself by people who are loving, compassionate, caring, non-judgmental, and listen and believe you, because people don't believe you because the other person may act differently in public, and you separate yourself from that person. Number one, you go to therapy and you start working through. You journal and you realize the truth of what's happened. You start rebuilding yourself. You create a new normal, because during that time, many of us, I could say, speak for myself for sure, and clients of mine, that the whole world becomes about that. It becomes about how they're going to treat you that day. Or, what can you do to make them happy? What can you do to make them want you? What can you do to make peace in the household? What can you do to, and it's all about that. And you lose yourself because it's all about that. It's, you become, you twist and turn in ways that you try to make the marriage work. And so you have to undo that. You have to figure out, either get yourself back to the person you were before. And let me tell you, people think that people are not healthy when they go in these relationships. I was extremely healthy before. People are you're attracted to them when you're healthy. So, you're also attracted to them when you're an empath, or when you're caring and compassionate, because they know they'll get to do things over and over again. But so you remove yourself from that person, anything about them. You remove yourself from flying monkeys, anyone that supports them and doesn't understand them. And flying monkeys could be someone that comes in and says, "Oh, they're so depressed, they need you." It doesn't even have to be someone who thinks poorly about you because they've turned them against you. It also could be someone who they've kind of got into bring you back. I call it abuse by proxy, or hoovering by proxy. Just remove yourself from all that so that you could start healing, because it's a process. But having them whispering in your ears is the reason why you couldn't, get healthy in the relationship. You need to remove it, and you create the new normal. Do things for yourself: hiking, meetup groups, exercising, anything that will help you become either the new you, or get yourself back. And then figure out what you may have done. I call it the traitor within. What kind of things? Because for me, I was trained to allow my men to do whatever they want, because that's how my mother was. That's how my grandmother was. It's intergenerational trauma.
Mm-hmm.
So I needed to undo the voices in my head from them, which was whatever they say, it's okay. You need to make it better. If they cheat on you, you just look the other way. If these are all, I watched it. If they, whatever it is, you just pull, you just stand up and carry on. And that's what my mother did. That's what my grandmother, this is what my aunt did. It's what I was taught. So you need to work on that. You need to figure out your traitor, your part, because you have no control of what they're going to do. You have to control about yourself. So it's empowering to figure out what that is. But it takes time. And I absolutely do not recommend dating for until this process is done, or at least 2 years stronger. And it could take a year. And
Yeah, I mean, it takes longer, I know, for a lot of people in our situation, because they've been so decimated, not just emotionally by this person, but financially through the court system. I know me, I feel like I'm pretty strong, and a lot stronger than most people I deal with. But even now, 10 plus years out with my partner, we've been together that long. I have this thing with marriage where I just feel like I love my partner, I trust my partner, but there's just something
so
with the idea.
it's still lingering.
Yeah,
Damage that they did.
interesting.
The trauma is still there.
Yeah,
But you recognize
yeah,
it, so at least you can talk. You can talk about it in your head about, okay, now I know that I'm feeling this way. What am I going to do with this? Where's it coming from? Because a
right.
lot of people come together in relationships. We have a lot of what disagreements are, or conversations are, comes from our past. It isn't necessarily the, like you're getting mad about the eggs, the pan that isn't washed isn't really about the pan that's being washed. It's about some other trauma that happened, and it's just important to recognize that you may never be 100% back to where you were. I'm sorry, but at least with recognition, you can understand that you said, like, from my past, I'm now scared of marriage or whatever, and so you understand that, and you can talk about it, and you can try to heal each other.
Yeah, and it is interesting because there's the trust issue that is a big thing with people in our community in particular, who say, you know what, I'm out and I'm good. but I never want to date again. I don't ever want to let anyone that close to me. And I always say, okay, that like I could totally understand that, and that's your choice, but look at all of the years and attention that that other person robbed from you. Are you going to let them rob all your future years, your chances of intimacy and love and happiness? Um,
Because they
it's
are in control of you as long as you let that happen.
yeah, yeah, yeah. What's the difference between grieving like an honest, truthful relationship and one that's toxic? Are there differences?
Yes. So going through grief of a normal, healthy relationship because two people just decided for whatever reason that it's not working, that they're friends instead of whatever it is. You go through quote unquote the normal process of grief. So you're going to, we talk about denial. So denial often starts with anticipatory grief when you're starting to realize in the relationship it's not going to work. It often
Hmm.
happens before the actual separation, divorce, and or during the separation process. And then you may go through anger, but maybe anger more about yourself because why did I marry my best friend? I should have. Well, I recommend marrying your best friend. Maybe that was the wrong example, but why did I marry just a friend? Something romantic.
Right, right, right.
Whatever. Still okay. It's still two people realizing it's not working. So you go through the process. You're not having someone bringing you back to court. You're not having someone. You don't have the voice in your head where someone's saying you're too sensitive, you're too this, you're too that. You're just, recognizing and feeling the loss of what it was. Now, some of the similarities, yes, you're still going to feel the loss of the person. You're still going to feel the loss of the title of being Mrs. or Mister. You're still feeling the loss of the house you lived in, the community you lived in, the friends that were couples that you hung out with. I mean, there's a lot of loss, like secondary losses that happen when you divorce that isn't just about the person. But what happens in a toxic one, or a one with the narcissist, which is often the toxic one, is that you're also grieving what you thought it was. You're realizing that it was all based on lies.
Mm-hmm.
You're realizing that that the potential or it was you were manipulated. You're realizing that it was 10 years, 20 years, 1 year, it doesn't matter, of lies, of manipulation, of and that is something that's hard to grasp. Then you're realizing lost time. At least in a healthy relationship, there was some good. There was some, yeah, maybe you still lost time because it took longer than you should have to leave or whatever it is that you're thinking. But in this type of relationship, you were fooled. I mean, you were fooled, and so you're grieving what you thought it was, but that you thought it was what it was. So it's the extra component that is,
Yeah, sometimes I think that part of grief is also um, losing faith in your own judgment. And
absolutely.
because you stop trusting yourself because you've been betrayed and you think, oh, I know I did, is like, I had such poor judgment. Like, I don't know if I can trust myself. It has nothing to do with other people, but how can I believe myself anymore? Like, how could I have made this terrible mistake? How could I have believe that for 20 years this person actually loved me?
Well, first of all, I'm very sorry.
No, that's okay.
When
I'm I'm really good.
yeah, no, I know you are
Yeah,
sorry
yeah.
you went through. But yes, of course, yes. How could you not? But anyone might, and I will say it again. I was a professional. I was helping people going through this, and I was fooled again and again, and I can't tell you how many times. And you just do because, and I, unlike other people, some people who don't trust after relationships, I still
Mhm.
trusted. The next day, person when they cheated on me, I said they weren't going to cheat again, and I trusted, and I started dating right away again. And although I don't recommend it, my traitorous self would trust again. So uh, anybody can be manipulated. Anybody can be, but it's not a reflection on you. I think that's where I always say knowledge is a superpower. The more you understand the other person, the more you understand that it's not your fault. It's not your fault you were abused. It was not your fault that you believed them. Of course you believe them. That's who you are. It's a reflection of you. You're honest. So of course you would think they would be honest. And it's not a reflection on you. It's not a reflection on your judgment. and the trauma bonding part is a physiological piece. And it's just they can really manipulate anybody, and they're often manipulating very strong, secure people.
Yeah, I always say that our clients, men and women all over the world, are the shining stars of human beings. We call them our sweetie pies. They're the most amazing, creative, sensitive, responsible, like wonderful, caretaking creatures. And that's the reason they were targeted, because we know that toxic people are energy vampires and they'll glom onto you because you make them look good. Like you make them feel more valuable.
We're their
Right.
mirror. What we what many of us do in the beginning is we are their mirror. So we're telling them how wonderful they're. In the beginning, we think they're wonderful. I mean, we're doing what they're acting wonderful for whatever your the love bombing is. My love bombing was always someone needing me to help them.
Mhm.
Like they knew that I didn't need things. It was more like they needed me to help them. So I fed into it, and I always made excuses, which we all did, I think, for their behavior, because that's the kind of people they pick. They pick people who will be empathetic and caring toward them, and they will, because most of the people that act this way, and it's not an excuse, and I will be very careful to say that, often come from trauma themselves,
Mhm.
but it's not an excuse. People,
Right.
get professional help. You don't have to be their therapist, but they pick, like you said, we start off being strong. We start off being they you know wonderful,
Yeah,
and
I think
makes
that
really
yeah, that's part of the game almost, is like tearing down a really strong person and making people like us dependent on them, and then making us feel like we can't function without them. And one of the things that happens in this relationship is we lose our center and we forget who we are. And I remember talking to just recently to a really good friend of mine, and I'm not even sure if her relationship is toxic. She's not even sure, but she said, I feel like I don't even know how to have fun anymore. I don't even know what I like anymore.
So one of the things I really recommend to people is to find that self. Now, if you're in the relationship and not sure what you're doing yet, you should find it in the relationship. And they often don't want you to, the other partner, but to
Mm-hmm.
do it, to do little things, even if it's taking walks and meeting new friends while you walk,
Mm-hmm.
or it's getting an online group, or doing something like that, because that's how you start building yourself back. And when you separate or divorce, you're doing the same thing, because you need to get yourself back.
Yeah. I know you had said something about grief being a luxury. Why is
Well,
grief a luxury?
because it's a process that is needed to go through. But when you're in a high conflict divorce,
Mm-hmm.
you're in safety mode. You're in you're being pulled back to court constantly. You're worrying about your children. They're still doing everything they were doing and worse. Sometimes it's worse after.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, which I don't want to scare anyone not to get divorced, because you should, but sometimes the process is going to be worse now, because they're feeling they're losing control, so they're doing everything they can, and they don't. I mean, they're losing money too when they're bringing you back to divorce. I have friends that were 10 years later, they're still for nothing. I mean,
Yeah,
they're not.
that's our people.
So
On the
yeah,
other end
and
of that.
what do you do about it? Because I mean, I gave up a lot because I didn't want to keep going through this, um, but it's not it's constant, because they need to constantly pull you back, and it doesn't mean they want you. It doesn't mean that sometimes they're married again, but they don't want to lose that control.
Yeah, and I think we talked about a term someone told me called there, it's like a clinging kind of hatred. It's like they're terrorizing you and they won't let go. I know a lot of our people are saying they already have a new relationship. Like, why are they still after me? Why are they still taking me to court? Like, why are they still,
Well,
trying to harm our kids?
it's supply. I mean, supply doesn't have to be someone saying you're wonderful, you're great. Supply is just getting a rile out of you, that they can still do it.
Right. We
And
engagement.
engagement, and they're an empty pot. They have a hole. They, like, no matter what they do, and they can still get it from that person, still get it from that person, but it keeps dripping out. So they keep grabbing. It's they're
Yeah.
parasites. It's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
sense. So why is grief a luxury? Because when you're going through all this, you can't go through the process. It becomes complex. It becomes, it's you can't go through the process. It can take many, many years to go through the grief process. And I think you need to be able to be healthy in the future and in future relationships and with yourself. But if they keep pulling you back in and you keep having to deal with it, it's delayed. The process is delayed. But,
Yeah.
but I think
Yeah. That's why it's not just about time.
no, not in this case.
Yeah.
Not in this case at all. So that's why it's a luxury. I think it's something that's needed, but something that you have difficulty going through when you're constantly being pulled back in by this other individual.
Yeah.
Feeling
So
feeling
another thing we talked about was children getting in the middle, like people weaponizing children. It's almost like, okay, we're not together anymore, and I have to play the villain, the victim, and you are the villain. And it's not just between the two of us, it's presenting to the world that I'm the good one and you're the bad one, and the kids have to choose. And you mentioned something about someone holding a spear and the
yes.
poison being the
I thought
child.
it was brilliant because I was going through that. I was the wife of someone whose ex was doing this, and my father had said that the child was the poison put at the end of the spear,
Mhm.
and the ex is using their child. They have no problem doing it. The ex is using their child in order to hurt, and it's an easy thing to do because if you tell the other partner that if you marry this person, then I'm not going to let you see their child.
Or
Um,
if you leave me, I'm not going to let you see the child. If you leave
yes,
me, I'm going to report you. I'm going to make up things
no.
about false allegations to make sure you never see the child.
As you know, I for many many years I did court evaluations and for custody and visitation. And one of the things that surprised me the most, and some of them were real, I don't mean all of that, were the allegations against, it happened to be husbands that I'm thinking of right now, that they claimed sexually abused their child.
All the
Now
time.
it was actually crazy for me to think that someone would actually. So of course I went into it thinking that it's true. That's how you go in to start the investigation. And at the end, and I was very thorough. It was not true. And I like, what kind of person would actually accuse their?
A lot of people
I was
do. Yeah.
shocked, and there were a lot. I mean, considering my percentage of cases that I had. And I was very careful because the last thing you want to do is say it's not true when it's true. But so they they would ruin their life. I mean, they would ruin the children, of course, and they would hurt. They didn't mind harming their children. I mean, they're hurting
Right.
doing that. So,
You,
and on top of that, of course, they could potentially ruin their ex's life by this
right.
false
And people
allegation.
on the outside cannot fathom that this is happening. And people on the inside who are saying, why is no one believing me in the legal system? It's because of the people that lie all the time. And so people become hardened to it because they're just like, I have to be very, very careful,
No,
and
but I think that also the people that also hire lawyers that are also narcissists or act as such.
Mhm.
So they go in very strong. And the judges weren't getting it. I hope things are different now. I don't know. You tell me
Mm.
if judges are knowledgeable.
Well, I think what we try to do is keep people out of court as much as possible because we know that you give up, not that you want to. I mean, I certainly spent enough time in court, but you have a lot more power and you can customize, let's say, a parenting plan when you do whatever you can outside of court, rather than leaving it up to the opinions of third-party strangers who can be manipulated by people like your ex because they have been doing this since they were adolescents. They're very practiced in it and they get off on manipulating people, especially now on a whole new level of stage. So, ooh, I can manipulate a judge. Wow. Now it's not just my ex. I can manipulate professionals. Like I'm really good. And they love it.
I went to oh my God, what's it called? Before it's with when they you meet in a room with a person they would before a court before going to court.
Mediation or family
Sorry,
relations. Yeah.
no, mediation. And I didn't understand this yet. This is why it's important that we're doing what we're doing. And I got up and walked out in tears because I
Mhm.
was so frustrated that this other person, my ex, was lying and lying and lying, and they were believing
All
him.
the
And
time.
and I just and I wish I had the ability, looking back, to be able to sit there and not cry because
Yeah.
I gave him his supply, but I wound up getting up and leaving because I felt so like no one understood what was happening.
Right. So that's the kind of thing we work with our clients on is getting ready for mediation is a really, really big deal, but anticipating what's going to come at you. We do a lot in terms of teaching the art of persuasion, knowing that you're going to get bullied, knowing that you're going to get pressured to settle, because when professionals see two parties and they see, okay, this one's being really difficult, so we're going to push the one that's probably more likely to give, because we just want to get out of here. We want this to end and move on. And so our clients, or someone like you in that situation, or someone like me, have to understand that and be ready for it, and be ready ahead of time with, like, here's my goals. We call it like a high, low, and walk. So my high is my fantasy. My low is like, I'm not, like, this is the least I would take, and I still wouldn't be happy, but I could live with it. And my walk is, nope, I'm getting up and walking out.
Wonderful for what you do, and as I'm listening, tell me if I'm wrong, but you make it more intellectual, you make it more cognitive, because I think one of the things that I do when it comes to like triggers is, and because we were being triggered by this act, they know how to trigger you, and that's what they're doing, and they know you're gonna become emotional. If you put yourself in a more cognitive state, and there's many ways of doing that, grounding techniques and breathing and all that, but you, by preparing them, so that's that you can go in and actually do it, and you can stay cognitive as much as you can,
Yeah.
and then actually get.
Yeah. So for example, when, like, people often are like, oh no, my ex's lawyer is lying about me and it's so awful and I'm crying and all this other stuff, I'm losing my temper, we can explain and show interviews with lawyers saying, that's my strategy, especially if I know you're representing yourself. If I could get under your skin, then I know I can win. When people hear that, like our clients hear that, and they're like, oh, they're basically doing the same thing. They're just trying to get me to cry or lose my temper so they can paint a bad picture. They become less scared because it's like, oh, this is a game. So that's their strategy. I understand it. I can prepare and not take it personally, and not say the lawyer hates me and the judge is believing it. Be like, they see this all the time. There's ways to deal with it. We have strategies too. But the big thing is getting, and I take this quote from Karen McMahon, who's another high conflict divorce strategist, getting your ex to stop squatting between your ears. So much of it is that fear of, like, what they think about me, I start thinking about myself, that I'm weak, that I can't do it, that I better do what they say or I'm going to get in trouble. And one of the other quotes that we use all the time comes from another friend of ours called Steve the Bodyguard. And he says, an abuser's greatest tool is fear. So when you walk into anything, a courtroom, an evaluation, a mediation, and you're scared, they've got you. So a big part of what we do with our clients is getting the ex's voice out of your head and getting you to stop being so scared. And I think I told you our little hashtag is from puddle to ninja. So you're a puddle, it's normal. Everybody feels that way at the beginning, but we got to get that fear away from you. And then you understand, okay, this is the stuff that matters. I could work on that. That stuff doesn't. I'm not going to pay attention to it
Wish
anymore.
I knew you when I was going through mine.
Yeah, it's very rewarding because it makes like such a difference when people understand their rights and they can put aside all that chatter
Yeah,
that
well,
they've been
matter.
listening to for the whole relationship and believing it.
They were abused and heard that for however amount of time they were in that relationship, and potentially had it in childhood too. Some of the same
Yeah,
messaging.
right.
So and do that. I mean, again, whatever you're doing is brilliant, and it brings you to a more cognitive level, and they feel taken care of. You're taking care of them.
Thanks.
You're taking care of them, and you're helping them take care of themselves. And
Yeah,
it's brilliant. It's wonderful.
thanks. Well, and back to the whole grief thing, um, we grow during this process and we don't grieve like who we were in the past. You know, you change. And I think that's something to not feel bad about, is like, I'm not the same person that I used to be. That's a good thing.
Well, the ideal again is to come out to a place where you accept that this is what happened. You accept that whatever it is, that it wasn't that you were manipulated and that you did have this loss. Like, yes, it did happen. It's not like you forget what happened. You accept it. You become less emotional about it, and then you can put it in your pocket as part of your life. But now it's in your past, and now
Right.
you be the best you, whatever that is. Free, hopefully,
Yeah.
voice, and have that voice come back and forth. Sometimes we take a few steps back because it's hard to undo it, but then do whatever it is. If it's breathing exercises or going to therapy for a couple sessions or talking to a really good friend, get through it and know that you're not going to be stuck. Because I think with grief, part of when I help people grieving is reminding them that there are times where you may take a couple steps back.
Hmm.
It doesn't mean you're going to be stuck there.
Yeah, we always talk about the emotional roller coaster. It doesn't just
Oh
get
yeah,
like
yeah, right.
that. Yeah. Yeah. So Jessica, how can people find you? I know, you're not practicing formally, but you're still helping people a lot.
Yeah. So I on social media, it's Jessica Ann Pressler. And TikTok, as long as we have TikTok.
I know that's been kind of up and down too.
Also, Instagram, Facebook.
Oh, and your
Uh,
book, don't forget your book.
yes, and I do have a website, jessicaannpressler.com, and on there, I think I have about 80 blogs, and it's all mental health, different blogs, a lot of narcissism, though, a lot on grief, and I'm putting one up today on grief after divorce because I want to talk about it first, and then I'm putting it up. And yes, I do. I have two books. I have one book that's going to come out in a few months, and that's a journal, and it's a journal with prompts, and it's to help you through the traitor within. It's help discovering your traitor within and healing. And it's 365 prompts, so you have one a day
Wow.
for if you do it that way. And you can download it now as a PDF or wait for the actual journal to come out. But it takes a few months before the publisher gets that out. That's that. And then a book called Traitor Within, and the traitor within is a tool naming the traitor and
I love the title of it.
and that's the part of us that we self-sabotage, basically, that pops up in, for me, it was in romantic relationships. And it's helping someone learn what that traitor is. It starts off, usually it's from trauma and messaging and modeling. So it's a way to empower someone to realize what part they play in whatever it is, understand it, accept it, and then heal. And that's part of what the journal does. And the book is actually a novel that I use my own story, although I change the names and identifying characters, so that I always think storytelling is a really good way to teach someone something. So I teach what the traitor within is by using my story. And it's somewhat salacious, sadly, because I lived it.
Sadly, that's
It is.
salacious. That's people like reading salacious.
For the readers, it's great. Going through it,
Yeah.
that will be out in the summer because it takes a while to get that out.
Oh, that's fantastic. So, thank you so much, Jessica. I was like, oh, I know we're going to be together again,
Yes, we
but
are.
on your platform
On
in a couple of weeks.
Valentine's Day.
Valentine's Day. That's right. That's right. That's right. We were talking about that, and I was trying to remember. We're going to talk about.
Yeah, the people that are dealing, the spouses that are dealing with the complicated divorce, with the divorces of the
Yeah.
younger.
So how your loved one's toxic relationship is affecting you as an outsider and what you can do. And I know that a lot of times family members will get in touch and be like, what do I do? Like my daughter or my son is in this awful relationship and they're pulling away from me and I'm so terrified, or
Yeah,
how to handle that.
so we didn't discuss it, but parental alienation is one of the things that does happen. We'll talk about it that day as well. Grandparents also, grandparents alienation. I did a blog on that as well because I
Okay.
was contacted by a parent who said, and sometimes during divorce, the other person will pull the parents
Yeah.
away from the children. So
Yeah. That's a weapon. Yeah. So we'll be talking about the weaponization of children and alienation, and also how other family members are affected by toxic people in toxic relationships. So, but thank you so much, Jessica, for coming on and taking the time today. And I'm so excited to see you again on Valentine's Day.
yes, I'll see you on Valentine's Day. I'm wearing red, maybe if I can find
I'll
it.
probably forget, but I'll try to remember.
Okay. See you
All
then.
right.
Thanks.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.